Tasmania's lower house has passed the nation's most sweeping transgender rights laws. The new laws allow for parents to opt in to have their child's sex recorded on their birth certificate. Will also allow 16-year-olds to change their gender by filling out a statutory declaration. Mercury political reporter Emily Baker told Paul Murray it's not clear yet how this bill will go in the upper house.
Labor has 4 members in the upper house, and then there are 4 independents that you'd probably class as progressive. There's 15 members. They're having briefings this Thursday. I wouldn't say it's certain either way at this point, and I think that it'll again be a pretty serious debate. But not having spoken to any of those members yet, I do find it a bit hard to say. Obviously, the Labor members would be voting in support of the bill.
They have changed the system from being automatic to opt-in. The idea that when, so a year ago in our case, my daughter is born, and it's like, do you want her to be recorded as a girl? Yes, please. This is the most ridiculous decision I've seen in a while, and yet again, that absolute turncoat, that former Lord Mayor of Hobart, who joins the Liberal Party at 5 minutes to midnight, gets into the Parliament and then sides with Labor and the Greens to take the speakership to run the Parliament she has never served in. She uses her casting vote to change something as fundamental as this.
Yeah,
this is a disgrace.
I think it's an absolute disgrace. And just a couple of points I'll make. Firstly, Troy was incorrect earlier when he said that Labor and the Greens have different values. They don't. They're part and parcel of the same thing. They're a horror show, Labor and the Greens, both of them, because they believe in this garbage. Now, the second point I'll make is that there will be a Royal Commission in 30 years' time into what this generation have done to children, messing up with their genders, their sexuality deliberately. Now, of course, there is gender dysphoria. That's a separate issue. There are a small number of people who genuinely suffer from that, and they deserve all the help, etc. But the reality is we are seeing that this has become a fad. This has become peer group pressure, and other things are pushing kids into transgenderism. And this law is just another step along the way. And we may as well put the names down of these people who voted for it, because they will be fronting up to a Royal Commission in 30 years' time to explain this madness. Because the reality is, we know from statistics that pushing people with puberty blockers, surgery, other things into transgender world, and we've got an expert on this speaking on Outsiders next week, Paul. We know that there are very, very serious psychological and health problems that come out from this push, and where the authorities are now enabling this. They are enablers now, the authorities, who should be protecting our children. This is every bit as bad as we saw in the past with the authorities failing to protect children in different ways. Our children are being victimised here, and the authorities are not protecting them. It is an absolute disgrace, an absolute abrogation of duty, and they will pay in 30 years' time, because I guarantee we'll be talking then about the Royal Commission into the transgender abuse of this period.
It's the Parliament, but it will now be a law enforced by the government. So let's just clear that up, Gary. But anyway, getting back to the substance of this issue, this is a disgrace. It's silly, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, and it's identity politics. I mentioned earlier that I wrote a column about this in the Australian today. This is a big problem in this country. It's growing. It's snowballing, and we need to start to think about it more seriously and deal with it, because there are big consequences here. And you know what the consequences are? It's for those little children that have just come into this world. They've just been born. They don't even know anything yet, and their parents are deciding whether or not to record their gender. Now, it's pretty obvious what the gender of a child is when they're born. Now, I fully support the right of anybody, when they reach their teenage years or their adult years, or whenever they're ready to make a decision, to change their gender and to identify as something else if that's what they want to do. I've never been worried about whether somebody wants to change their sexuality or change their gender or identify in one particular way or another, or be a part of a religion or whatever. That's up to them. That's freedom, that's liberty. That's what somebody should be able to do. But the people in the hospital and the people in terms of the parents should not be able to make this decision for that child in the earliest moments of their life. It is a terrible decision, and it could have very, very significant psychological impacts on these children if they find out, for example, that clearly they're a boy, but they weren't registered as a boy or a girl at birth. I mean, this is a strange, bizarre, and indeed very dangerous decision by the Parliament.
Tasmania wiping gender off the map. Gender is now opt-in on their birth certificates if the upper house passes it. The Liberals voted against it, except for one, the Speaker, who was, of course, a rat who got together with Labor and the Greens. What do you think?
Oh, mate, it's a disgraceful move, but I've got to say I'm not surprised in the slightest, because this has been coming step by step for years now. The 2016 census in Australia, when asked for the first time ever in Australian history, if you were asked what gender you were, there was a third option. Everyone knows what the first two are, but the third option was just a blank space and you could fill in whatever you wanted. So, I mean, you know, bureaucracies and governments have been heading in this direction for a long time, and I think it's just an absolute disgrace, to be honest.
Well, it's this thing where, again, I completely understand opt-out. I understand if there are kooky parents who want to make this decision and it's their right and that's the life they want for their kid, opt out. I'm fine with that decision. But the idea that the norm, the starting point for gender in Tasmania is now blank, that is bizarre to me, Steve. It truly is.
Paul, I'm devastated, because you know how I feel about this political correctness crap that's going on in this country. It's got to stop, mate. We've had Thomas the Tank under attack. I think it was Snow White a couple of weeks ago. They want to get rid of Australia Day. You know, bloody leave us alone. You know, men and women are men and women, girls and boys are girls and boys, and if you want to be something else, mate, go for it. Nobody's got a problem with it, but leave the rest of us out of it.
But what's going to be fascinating here is this wasn't something where the Greens were able to cobble something together. This only happened because Labor voted for it. Fred, Bill Shorten's got to be asked about this tomorrow, and it's a yes-no question. Does he believe that gender is blank or boy-girl with an opt-out? He can't muck around here. He either has to agree with what they've done in Tasmania or he has to stand against it. And this is going to be one of those defining, absolutely defining moments. Do you think that the collective press corps have the guts to actually ask him tomorrow when he pops up somewhere?
Geez, I wish they do, mate. But, I mean, you know, he has to step up to the plate. He's got to step up to the plate on a whole range of issues, you know. So, I mean, this is just another one. He just signals to the swinging voters who he thinks lean towards political correctness, and you know, puts his finger in the air, sees which way the wind is blowing, and responds accordingly. Mate, politics just doesn't believe in principle anymore. I mean, there is a really profound principle at stake here, and that is the scientific heritage of our society based on two sexes. You know, let's not even use the word gender because it's a scientific concept. It's sexes, and that's how we procreate, that's how we continue to survive as a society. Anyone who puts any ambiguity on that topic, I think is just kidding themselves. And I do hope Bill Shorten steps up and says, look, this is rubbish, but I'm not holding my breath, mate. Tasmania,
this has been the issue that has dominated the week for those of us that care about common sense, which is opt-in for gender. Now, Sue Hickley, who is the Speaker down there, I call her the Hamburglar because she is the lady who was elevated to the speakership when the Labor and Greens got together, and she was one of the only votes who actually, of course, that's why I call her the Hamburglar, because of what she was dressed, and she ratted on the libs. Will Hodgman fought an entire election to say, can I please have a freaking majority? He got a majority, and she blew it away on the first minute that Parliament took place. She has voted with Labor and the Greens to change the system into an opt-in system when it comes to gender. So here's how it works. Congratulations, you've got it's up to you. And if you want the person with the penis to be called a boy, you have to apply for that to be the case. It's not a system where, if you're the kooky parent who says, no, we're not going for a gender, where you can opt out, like it is for vaccinations, opt out like it is for religious education in school, even opt out when it comes to school sport. No, this is a scenario where gender itself is being fiddled with, because here's the game. I remember this stuff from my postmodern humanities time at university. It's all about teaching you, the parent and grandparent, that gender is a construction, that gender is made up, that the things that make boys boys and girls girls are all made up. What I find ludicrous about what's happened in Tasmania, Tim Mander, is these are all the same people who say the science is in, we must slavishly follow the science on climate change, but the scientific reality of male and female as gender, that doesn't matter.
Paul, the world has officially gone mad. It's just beyond belief that these type of things can be even thought about. When they've done this up here in Queensland with the driver's licences, taken off gender, and it's my firm opinion that the vast majority of people think this is absolute nonsense and they don't want to be subject to this political correctness. It is just a joke. It makes us a laughing stock, and of course, what it does do, in fact, is the opposite. It causes confusion. Boys are boys, girls are girls, particularly at birth, and not have it on a birth certificate is an absolute joke.
Now, Gerard, just one that's come up this evening, which I would hope Advance Australia would be jumping on to, which is that the Tasmanian Parliament, thanks to Labor and the Greens, have now made it passed new gender laws whereby you have to opt in. We talked about this on Paul Murray's show. It was announced by Paul Murray earlier this evening that in Tasmania now you will have to opt in to have your child, your baby's gender recorded on a birth certificate. Surely this is the sort of thing that Advance Australia needs to be absolutely getting people fired up about.
Yeah, and I think they're certainly not mainstream values, and I think, Rowan, the left-leaning Liberal speaker who's been bought off and supported those changes as the casting vote also deserves some attention there. The thing that we would seek to do is raise awareness. If this can happen, this issue was never brought to an election as far as my knowledge is concerned. These issues and these changes are made and it's the tail wagging the dog, and Australians are sick of it. They want control back over their destiny. So, whether it's the fact that electricity prices are skyrocketing, whether their cities are congested, or the fact that they don't think that people are listening to their concerns.
It's totally insanity. Look, I bet, I'll be very interested to see the figures here. I bet in the next 10,000 babies born in the Apple Isle that you're probably going to have about 2 crazy parents who are going to say that their child is not a baby or a boy. So this is insanity at the political level. I bet down in those maternity wards it'll be a non-issue. Of course they're going to say their little baby boy is a boy or a girl.
The new laws allow for parents to opt in to have their child's sex recorded on their birth certificate, amongst other changes. I spoke to Tasmanian Health Minister and Leader of the House, Michael Ferguson, about the legislation a little earlier.
What actually happened was that Labor and the Greens did a deal, relatively in secret, and hijacked that bill for an altogether separate purpose, which is to take gender, to take the sex of a child off their birth certificate, and we don't support that, never have, for a range of reasons, including the fact that this is denying children who they really are. It's offensive to parents, and not one of those individuals has actually taken this policy to an election. We only had one 8 months ago, and none of them have been consulted with the Tasmanian public. I think it's for those reasons that, you know, it's a bill that's been hijacked and we don't support those amendments. What Labor and the Greens have done is something that's quite extraordinary. It's untested, it's been cobbled together, and it's actually setting it out as a default that on a birth certificate it won't record male or female.
One of the other aspects within this is around anti-discrimination law and wanting to also make illegal so-called gender expression, so that if someone has changed their sex, you're not allowed to refer to them as their previous sex. Is that fair enough?
That's again a very long stretch of the use of the law to sanction legally people using discrimination law, which is there for a good reason. It's to protect people's rights and ensure that they're not ill-treated in the community. And Labor have again used the Anti-Discrimination Act as a vehicle to, you know, impose this ideology on Tasmanians. But I think as well, people should be very concerned that they've also taken a blade to the understood and long promised exemption from religious celebrants. So we provided that in our legislation so that they wouldn't be taken to the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal for not agreeing to marry a same-sex couple if that was their church's teaching, but Labor and the Greens also took that out. So there's just way too much going on here, too many amendments that have been done on the fly. They haven't consulted, they've done it quite secretly, and again, I don't understand why they would do this, and I wonder if Bill Shorten is saying that he has no plans to do this, why he won't just rule it out.
So just on the gender expression, though, if the aim of this, or one particular aspect, if someone obviously is at a particular workplace, they change their gender, they go from a Miss to a Mrs, and those colleagues make a note of deliberately calling them Mr Jones instead and not going by the new honorific, should they be allowed to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that these changes have far-reaching consequences into the lives of everyday people. They need to be very carefully thought through and very carefully scrutinised. That has not happened. And if you're going to make...
Fair enough on that aspect, but I'm just asking you what you think of that particular example.
Well, I think that there's good manners and then there's actually taking somebody to have broken the law. So I think that these are very far-reaching changes and they need to be very carefully thought through before they're rushed into law.